Blue flowers in the snow. A wild spray of iridescent hues tumbled over each other as they raced across the walls of the endless cave. A rich, strong purple clawed its way ahead of a wave of verdant green radiance, both of them chased by a wash of flaming orange luster that threatened to set the stone walls alight. Druza couldn't resist laughing at the sight, her spirits lifted by her friend's joy. The news that they were going to stay had sent the dancer cavorting and spinning, launching 1,000 shimmers and shadows to do battle with each other in every corner of the chamber. Their celebration was palpable and contagious, the strength of it almost impossible to resist. "Yes, it's the best news. Felix says that so long as the Senate doesn't renege on their promises, then we can stay here and prosper. Everything will go back to being just the way it was." To her surprise, the dancer stopped immediately. The riot of colours flying through the air crashed to a halt, stuck fast like thick paint on a canvas. "Disagreement." "What?" said Druza, confused by her friend's rebuttal. "It's the best news. This is exactly what we hoped for." A golden cerise beryl feather swam lazily through the air between them to plant the lightest of touches on Druza's shoulders. The embrace brought a crazed plethora of images, each one a moment of wild thought with no concern for the others in the train. Druza laughed again. No, you're right, of course. Nothing is ever the same. Things always change. And yes, you're right. So many opportunities. Who knows where this will lead? Overview. The territory of Spiral remains split between the League and the groups of Urizen rebels who will not countenance the Senate's decision to accept the proposal of former Salt Lord Kaliact. Some of the rebels have had their demands met. The Senate chose to meet certain costs for the Urizeni who wish to remain connected to their peers in the rest of the nation. Other demands are still being negotiated. The Urizen Assembly has upheld encouraging statements saying the negotiations are going well, urging the rebels not back down, but not to take precipitate action either. Confidence grows among the rebels, due in large part to the mandate enacted by Aurum of the Nightingale Temple, which warns that should the Empire send troops to root out the rebels, the whole of Urizen will rise to protect them. The virtuous build up their fellows, they do not tear them down. Blue flowers bloom in Spiral, and if we are to hold true to the promise of this empire, we cannot lord one while cutting down another. Should the empire shed Urizen blood in this matter, it will prove they value thieves and slavers over virtuous citizens. It will prove they are unworthy of the oldest nation. We send Aurum of the Nightingale Temple with 25 doses of Liao to encourage all Urizen to stand in defiance of an empire that treats our lives as an inconvenience, should they dare to enact violence against our people. Loyalty demands, and we cannot condemn the people of Spiral for having answered. Aurum of the Nightingale Temple. Mandate Urizen Assembly, upheld with a greater majority, 267 to 75. Autumn Equinox, 385 YE. The confidence does not, however, only come from the words of the Assembly. The rebels proudly declare that they have received scores of winged messengers from spires all over Spiral, all professing support for them and their cause in different ways. Not just Spiral either. Magicians across Urizen respond to a powerful curse that has settled over Morrow and Redoubt, which many see as an attack on their nation by jealous imperial peers. If any of the rebels had any fears that their lack of representation at Anvil might harm their position, they are utterly reassured that their fellow Urizeni citizens are negotiating hard on their behalf, a view that is only strengthened by the decision of the Imperial Senate to pay for the mana needed to shield all the spires in the territory from the impacts of being in a foreign territory. Meanwhile, the League continues settling into their new home, with varying degrees of good grace. The Gone. Almost all those whose greatest loyalty lay with the Empire have now left Spiral entirely to establish new spires in Zenith and Redoubt. Some have gained additional finances for their departure by selling the buildings of their former spires to League citizens. Given that the League still cannot build new structures that enjoy the protection of the bloc, Such real estate fetches a handsome price. Price of remaining. Actius, arbiter of the Deathless Cave, was elected to represent those whose loyalty lies first and foremost with their spires, and who wish to remain in Spiral if possible. Actius claims to be representing nearly a third of the rebels in Spiral, but he quickly claims to have the support of various spires across Urizen, including most notably the Great Library of Ankarian, who have pledged their unequivocal support for Actius' cause. In response to those demands, the Imperial Senate agreed to support a motion raised by Genoveva Barossa d'Apulian, the new senator for Spiral, to provide sufficient crystal mana to the Urizen of Spiral that they can take advantage of a boon offered by the Eternal Sung, to help the Urizen inhabitants of Spiral maintain prosperous links with each other and with the neighbouring spires of Redoubt and Zenith. As pointed out in the appraisal, there are two weaknesses to this approach. The first is that it means enchanting every Urizen resource in Spiral with Veil of Shadows, and while that provides a valuable benefit if the territory comes under attack again, it means that no Urizen resource in the territory can benefit from any other ritual. It also means that any Imperial magician attending Anvil who made separate arrangements to enchant their own personal resource with a different ritual would not benefit from the protection provided by Sung, and would experience the resulting penalty to production. It also impacts the availability of mana crystals in Spiral. Having an Imperial office buy every available mana crystal means it is not possible for the Imperial Senate to construct a sinecure, ministry, or great work in the territory that provided mana crystals while these arrangements are in place, not without an opportunity. A few of the more militant Urizeni point out a third problem, that the Senate could simply stop funding the supply of mana at any time. The spires mostly don't consider this to be a likely outcome. If it did happen, it would be a very clear sign that the Senate cannot be trusted and that they should either join the rebels or start a rebellion of their own. But, almost as if preempting these gripes, the Synod is already ahead of them. All that is worthwhile. Last summit, Isaiah Pavone de Savos called on the people of the League to use their ample reserves of mana crystals, granted to them by Lorenzo's Legacies of Virtue, to directly fund the cost of the shrouds. This wouldn't be trivial, but it could be done with the help of the civil service. The same infrastructure supporting the collection of mana in Spiral could be relocated to the 4 cities of the League where such legacies were built. They'd be transported to Spiral and the newly established distribution office would take over. All that would be required is for the Imperial Senate to use a Senate motion that clearly stated that all mana crystals from the Legacy of Ambition in Tasato, the Legacy of Loyalty in Temeshwar, the Legacy of Courage in Holberg, and the Legacy of Pride in Savos be used to support the Spires of Spiral. If this were done, the 4 great works would stop providing additional mana to the mana sites of the League. They would still count as a level of investment in mana sites, however. The cost to the Senate would fall precipitously to 5 thrones, mostly due to no longer needing to buy mana crystals in Spiral. It would also be possible to invest in Spiral's mana production again, now that every available crystal is not being bought up by the civil service. The League would lose out, but Lorenzo's legacies would still exist, only now they would be helping to build bridges between Urizen and the League. A fitting legacy, perhaps. The Rebels. Then there are the Urizen rebels, whose spires still control the regions of Acre and Sinion. Their strength has been reduced by the Senate's decision to support those who simply wish to continue living in Spiral, but those represented by Tiborian of the Endless Horizon and Kyla of the Tower of the Silver Flame remain strong in their convictions. Both groups claim to have received a number of winged messengers pledging support for their cause, although unlike Actius, they have not gone so far as to publicly name their backers. There is still no appetite for direct conflict with the Empire, although they remain ready to fight if it comes to it, and if the Empire can find them. Thanks to the mandate enacted by Aurum of the Nightingale Temple, however, the likelihood of open conflict has been even further reduced. If the Empire sends an army to suppress the rebels at any point before the start of the autumn equinox 386 YE, the rebellion will spread to the rest of Urizen. Spires will take up arms and declare their support for the rebellion and opposition to the Empire. For now, at least, the threat of open conflict has become more distant. Or more disastrous when it happens, depending on how pessimistic one is. For their part, the rebels are not interested in picking a fight with the Empire or the League. Not at the moment, at any rate. The faction represented by Tiborian of the Endless Horizon continues to urge caution. Their concern remains securing the presence of Urizen in the Senate to make up for the voice they have lost by losing the senator for Spiral. Their demand was for Urizen to be granted the Master of the Imperial Mint, with the Imperial Mint relocated to Cargo. Tiborian is clear that he does not believe that a statue or some other minor title is acceptable. The mages who chose Tiborian to present their demands are clear that they believe that Urizen has suffered in recent years because it has been politically sidelined. Without enough powerful voices to speak on its behalf, and crucially without the power to swing key votes, it has been left brutally exposed to the attacks of the Druge and the Grendel. Arguably, Kaliakt would never have been in a position to make the offer she did if Urizen's prosperity had been foremost in the minds of the Empire's rulers. Having lost a senator, their political position has weakened further. The only way to compensate for that is with a position as politically influential and powerful as a senator. However, there is one suggestion that has been made to Tiborian that does appeal. The War Mage is elected by the Conclave to a position in the Military Council. The title is often held by an Urizeni, a reflection of their influence in the Conclave, but that outcome is far from guaranteed. In recent memory, both Dawn and the Navarre have held the title. If the Empire found some way to make the title an Urizen national position, that would ensure the seat was always held by Urizen. That wouldn't improve their current position. It's held by Andronikos of the Lighthouse at Nikephoros at present, but it would ensure that Urizen always had a second vote in the Military Council, an important step given their difficulties in raising additional armies. There are a host of practical, legal difficulties in making the War Mage an Urizen position, but if those could be solved, then the new throne could ratify any changes. The more militant faction that looks to Kyla of the Tower of the Silver Flame for guidance are adamant that only the reversal of the Senate's decision to allocate Spiral to the League will satisfy them. Obviously, doing so would still be disastrous for the Empire's newest citizens, and the perceived authority of the Senate. With every passing day, such an outcome looks increasingly impossible. It seems likely another route will need to be found, if one exists. Or perhaps not. There are some in Spiral who point out that the League, and thus the Empire, still control Abstrus, Apulus, Atari, Ossuary, where the Mithril mine is, and of course Screed, about which the less said the better. With one or two regions in non-imperial hands, control of the territory is a little more fragile than it might be, but so what? The Empire would need to lose 2 more regions before their control was in doubt, and that doesn't make Spiral much more fragile than a great many other imperial territories. As long as the League remains vigilant against barbarian foes, the rebel spires could presumably follow the example of Actius, Arbiter of the Deathless Cave, and just get on with it. The danger remains, however, that the rebel spires might make some sort of agreement with the Grendel. It's not viewed as particularly likely. The Urizen of Spiral have more reason than most to despise the Orcs of the Broken Shore, but it's not impossible. If there's secret magical communication going on between the rebels and the Salt Lords, though, nobody has seen any sign of it. It would require the intervention of skilled investigators practiced at avoiding notice, like the Silent Bell or perhaps the Shuttered Lantern, to determine if such contacts are being pursued. The Synod can guide the Silent Bell, of course, and the Grand Master of the Shuttered Lantern could ask members of their order to carefully investigate the rebel spires, with a suitably worded declaration of concord supported by the Conclave. Outreach. Both the League and Urizen National Assemblies released statements of principle that look closely coordinated, calling for the city of Apulian to include the best of Urizeni culture. This statement seems to link to the call by Agathea for Urizen magicians living in Spiral to consider joining the League, taking their skills, their knowledge and their cultural sophistication with them. This would, in Agathea's view, be an important counterweight to the mass of kitsch philosophy, tawdry aesthetics and cynical politics that the League have just embraced. Crucially, if you care about Spiral, it would be a way to push the territory to continue to seek enlightenment and strive to be a place that brings light to the darkness. The idea is at least theoretically feasible. Both Lepidina and Leah Adelar von Holberg are right to point out that Temeshwar, for good and for bad, retains some of the qualities of its Varushkan heritage. There is still an opportunity for the Urizen who live here to influence the story that is written as Spiral turns the page on a new chapter. The cost, of course, is high, if it means leaving behind the nation that pursues Arret for one that values rings, crowns and thrones. Too high for some, certainly, but perhaps not all. Some Urizeni, those whose first loyalties were to the Empire, have already left the territory. But spires like the Deathless Cave are planning to stay for the long term, and looking for ways to live with the new arrangements. They consider themselves to be Urizeni, and doubtless the plan of the majority is to remain so, but they could be encouraged to share the best of Urizeni culture with the Apulians, and some might join the League in time. Closer links with Apulian would benefit the League. The Deathless Cave and some of the other spires that supported Actius are renowned for their musical skills, their prowess with night magic, and their love of mysteries, all of which could bring mutual benefits. Of course, the situation with the other rebels is more challenging. It's hard to imagine Kyla and her supporters being in favour of closer cooperation with the League right now, but Tiborian of the Endless Horizon might be open to the idea. They will definitely never join the League. They are steadfastly loyal to Urizen, but they have no quarrel with the League, and they are perspicacious enough to understand that good relations with the Apulians could be a benefit to Urizen. Both statements of principle suggest in different ways that these matters can wait until the current strife is resolved. Of course, that assumes it can be resolved, and that such possibilities still exist then. The Empire seems to have resolved one of the three key demands, but the longer the current impasse continues, the more entrenched the sides are likely to become. If the Urizen National Assembly is serious about a cultural exchange with the League, they cannot afford to wait forever, or the opportunity will be gone. At the coming summit or the next, the Urizen National Assembly could pass the following mandate. We welcome dialogue with the Apulians to further our collective understanding of the way and lift each other up in virtue. We send named priest with 25 doses of Liao to encourage those Urizen magicians who have decided to stay to share the best of Urizeni culture with the League. Let us share our values with them and make Apulian a city founded on philosophy, learning and a vision for a better future. Synod Mandate, Urizen National Assembly. If this mandate were enacted, then the musicians and night magicians of the Deathless Cave and other spires like them would look for opportunities to share the best of Urizeni culture with the Apulians. A few may even be tempted to leave the mountain spires and move to the city and settle there, possibly even becoming League citizens. It will have a slow but inexorable effect on the culture of Apulian, shaping the future of the newest city of the League. If other Urizeni groups have been reconciled with the political situation at the point where the mandate is enacted, then they will likewise be affected. Groups that remain hostile, notably those spires represented by Kylie and Tiberian at this time, would not be affected, and would not be persuadable in the future. Unconstructive commentary. Not everyone on the League side is being entirely constructive, unfortunately. Ludwig Vassilo von Temeshwar is a former bishop of the city who preaches about pride, prosperity and ambition. Newly arrived in Apulus, he has been calling for the League senators to commission an appraisal as to how the nation might best begin to exploit the new resources in the territory. He's been quoting very select fragments from the statement of principle of Corrado Filiaci di Gregario, and while most people are sensibly keeping their distance, not everyone thinks he's an ignorant blowhard. In particular, his call for the League to find a way to duplicate the protective measures of the bloc, given the Urizen are refusing to share its secrets. What the Urizen can design, we can build better, he claims. While Ludwig is obviously a bit of an ignorant bore, his words aren't entirely without merit. While the former Temeshvari bishop obviously intends for any appraisal to be entirely about the League, the Senate could take a more measured approach and look specifically for ways to draw on the best of League innovation and Urizeni wisdom in bolstering the prosperity of Spiral. It would all depend on how the appraisal was phrased and who was assigned to perform it. The Jaws of Winter. While eyes are on the political situation in Spiral, something is settling over Morrow and Redoubt. A cloying shroud of winter magic begins to take hold as autumn recedes. The weather worsens, and magicians across both territories begin to show signs of magical influence. Some become lethargic and morose, while others, by contrast, become short-tempered and easily angered. Not a great combination for a nation with as many magicians as Urizen, obviously. Fortunately, there are a great many magicians in Urizen, and they quickly identify the nature of the attack. The Icy Maw Devours the Spark of Essence curse has been laid over western Urizen. And indeed, as the winter lengthens, the mana sites in both territories fail to produce the bounty of crystal mana that might have been expected. Roughly half of the crystals rupture and crack when they are handled, like hollow crystals of ice, releasing a brackish, dark-coloured liquid. Worthless. The malaise and ill temper the curse brings is treated by most as an exercise in poise. Identifying when such feelings come from outside rather than from within makes it easier to compartmentalise them and channel them into something constructive. Which is not to say that they are appreciated. It is clear that Urizen has come under some kind of attack. The last time was 6 years ago. Much as with that attack, it does not appear that the Grendel or the Druge are behind the curses, but rather they seem to be the work of another imperial nation. The insult is clear, and whatever the reason or the intention, it mostly serves to increase support across Urizen for the rebels in Spiral, and frustration about the opprobrium with which magicians from the nation seem to be being treated at Anvil. Also caught up in the effects of the curse are the Citadel Guard, which adds injury to insult. The Urizen army is in Morrow, engaged in arcane consolidation, and the curse is no kinder to them than it is to the spires. Half the expected number of crystals are gathered by the army. Having the amount of mana reduced this season hurts, but there is some concern about what might happen if the curse continues through to spring. If the mountains of Redoubt or Morrow, or both, are subjected to a second consecutive Icy Maw, the effects will worsen. They will extend to affect sinecures and ministries, as well as personal resources. Not just ministries in Urizen either. There are a number of markets that deal in mana across the Empire that are supported to one degree or another by Urizen sites. If the curse is maintained, the price of mana from such markets may begin to increase. Participation. Icy Urizen. Any Urizen magician whose personal resource is in Morrow or Redoubt, who has spent time there this season, or who has accompanied the Citadel Guard, may be evidencing the lingering effects of the curse. They experience a role-playing effect. Either you feel an unpleasant malaise that leaves you lethargic and disinclined to do anything that you feel requires a lot of effort, or you feel short-tempered and irritable. Being insulted or dismissed in particular makes you angry and want to lash out. It's acceptable to switch between the two over the course of the event if you wish. Any magician who does opt to experience the lingering role-playing effect may call on their poise to gain a one-off benefit. By unleashing a burst of fury one that has been carefully banked for several months, the magician may cast a single combat spell that costs 1 mana without spending any personal mana. The role-playing effect starts to fade once the burst of rage is unleashed. Regardless, the lingering effects of the curse will have faded entirely by the end of the winter solstice, assuming the curse is not replaced this season.